today's announcements. Get in. Well, come on top. We're going for a ride. Let's go. We made it to our first stop. We have social media. We have Instagram and YouTube. Make sure that you guys are following us at Sunrise Students CA. Hopefully I do not tip over. We post Me Mondays sometimes. We post pictures of you guys on our social media, so be on the lookout for those. Make sure you're following us like I said, and yeah, okay, next stop. Okay, so services, we have them on Wednesdays, we have them on Sundays. Wednesdays are at 6:15 p.m. They are on YouTube. They're on Instagram at Sunrise Student CA. Make sure that you guys are watching that if you don't make it on Sundays. But if you do, we have Sundays at 11 a.m. every single Sunday where we do small groups, we play games, we have Impossible Shot. So make sure that you don't miss that. Look at all these pretty flowers. Speaking of flowers and pretty people and pretty things, moms, you guys, it's almost Mother's Day and we need your help. We need you guys to volunteer now. And on Sunday, we'll be giving out cards to the moms. So if you want to help us out with that, make sure that you let one of your leaders know. gonna have another digital Among Us event, so make sure that you keep an eye out for details. It's coming up in May, I believe May 21st. Not sure though, at 7 p.m. So keep an eye out for the details. They'll be up here somewhere. Okay, bye!
Hey students, this is Pastor Josh here to bring you an introduction to our first lesson of a new teaching series called Anthem. And today we're going to be talking about how we worship with all of creation. Well, let me ask you a question before we get into our teaching. If you could create a greatest hits album for one of your favorite artists, two questions: who would that artist be, and what would be the first song that you would create for them? So let me know in the chat. If you could create a greatest hits album, who would be the artist that you'd create that for, and what would that first song be? I'm really curious as to what your responses are. Let us know in the chat. Why am I asking this question? Because for the next couple of weeks through this teaching series, we're going to be exploring a big collection of songs and poems that are kind of like the greatest hits album of songs that are about God. And we're going to see that these songs are beautiful. They're beautifully written to help us understand who God is, why he deserves all the glory, honor, and praise that he deserves. But we're also going to learn that these songs are helpful and they're useful for each and every one of us. See, whether something is beautiful or useful, and many are both, here's what they have all in common. All created things tell us something about the person who created them. And we're going to learn about that as we go through this teaching series. For most of us, we need to have an understanding, a good understanding on how we are to worship God, the words that we are called to sing and to praise unto God. But we also have to have sort of this mindset of what it looks like to truly worship God. And that's going to be my hope for all of you guys as we head into this teaching series. Now, Pastor Eric Wade is going to help us understand, why does this matter to God and why should it matter to us? Pastor Eric, over to you.
Hey, thank you, Pastor Josh. Hey, students, what's going on? So like any creation, our universe tells a lot about the God who created it. So which part of creation most reflects God's image to you and why? So if you're watching this online, let us know in the chat. If you're watching this in person, maybe pause and talk about it. Which part of God's creation most reflects God's image to you and why? Maybe it's the night sky, or maybe it's the sunrise or the sunset, or maybe it's mountains or rivers or lakes or the ocean or humans. Maybe it's our friends, maybe it's our family, or maybe it's something else. Let us know. We want to know what part of God's creation most reflects God's image to you and why. So if we believe that God created everything around us, then the evidence of God is everywhere too. Like studying people's creations can help us understand their creators, today I want to talk to you and show you how studying and experiencing God's creation can actually help us better understand the God who made it. So I want to tell you a little story here. I like nature. I like being out in nature, and I like being out in nature because it helps me connect with God on a different level than reading an academic book or listening to a podcast or worship. It just helps me connect with God on a different level. And I remember very specifically on my wedding day, I was up in the mountains in Lake Arrowhead, Running Springs area, and it was my wedding day. I woke up early. My groomsmen were asleep, and I woke up and I went to the special place that I used to go to all the time. And I sat on a rock that overlooked this huge valley. And I remember reading the word and praying to God, God, don't let me mess this up. Don't let me be a failure. And I just had this peace. And looking over the valley, I remember the Spirit of God saying to me, if I can keep this in order, I can keep you in order as long as you submit to me. And even today, I still sense that same that feeling and that what God tells me when I sit on the beach and I just watch and listen and feel the waves of the ocean come over me and feel in the midst of the ocean and just hearing the waves and watching them crash in only to a certain point and then go back to a certain point and seeing how everything works in perfect order. And it helps me to connect with God, that God is a God of order and God is a God of structure. And I know as I submit my life to Him, I know that I will be in that as well. And so that's just how I connect with nature and how I connect with God through nature, rather. And God's creation has a way of doing a multiple things. It has a way of inspiring awe within us. And it makes us feel small, especially if you've ever been in the ocean or in the mountains, you could feel really small. It has a way of revealing truths about God's character to us, and it can help us feel close to God when we have those moments of awe and wonder. Has any of that ever happened to you? Has nature ever helped you connect with God? Let us know in the chat. Let us know a little bit about it. Or again, if you're watching this in person, maybe pause and talk about it. Because when we think about connecting with God, we often think about connecting with God through prayer or reading the Bible or going to church. And of course, those are all very essential ways to connect with the Lord. But today I want us to see how creation can help us connect with the Lord as well. And even this, the Bible tells us that that can happen as well. So right in the middle of the Bible, there's a book called the Book of Psalms, and it's a collection of songs and poems about who God is and what God has done. And Psalms is kind of like a manual for worship and life with God. And maybe that sounds boring to you, or maybe it sounds repetitive. Maybe you're wondering, like, how many different ways can you say, God, I want to worship you, or I worship you, God. But here's the deal, guys. The truth is that these songs serve a lot of different purposes. They're not just songs about God, I worship you, I worship you, I worship you. They serve a lot of different purposes. And some of those purposes are this: personal stories about the authors with real struggles, with real hopes, and with real fears. Some of them are songs of praise and worship about how the author feels about God, some good, some bad. Some songs are tell about a story that help us know the character of God. And then some are even emotional and angry songs where the author is questioning God or expressing grief that he has towards God, doubt that they have towards God, and frustration that they have with God. So guys, in this series, we're going to explore some of the different types of Psalms and wonder what these Psalms can teach us about connecting with God on a different level, and then put these into ideas and practices in our own lives. So the glory of God's creation is one of the most common themes in the book of Psalms, and many of these songs talk about the creation in order to thank God for being a good creator, in order to honor God as the sovereign and ruler God over creation, and to reveal something about God's character by observing nature. So I want us to read Psalm 19, verses 1 through 6. If you have your Bible, open them there. If not, the words are going to be on the screen. This is what Psalm 19, verses 1 through 6 says. It says, "The heavens proclaim the glory of God. The sky displays his craftsmanship. Day after day they continue to speak. Night after night they make him known. They speak without a sound or a word. Their voice is never heard. Yet the message has gone throughout the earth, and their words to all the world. God has made a home in the heavens for the sun. It bursts forth like a radiant bridegroom after his wedding. It rejoices like a great athlete, eager to run the race. The sun rises at one end of the heavens, and it follows its course to the other end. Nothing can hide from its heat." So here the psalmist tells us creation declares God's glory. Creation declares God's glory, whether it's the sky, or it's the sea, or it's the mountains, or the tiny details found in a single grain of sand. The created world reveals the glorious creator that created it. And there are also Psalms in the book of Psalms that record the psalmist's response to experiencing and reflecting the glory of God's creation. Okay, let's look at Psalm 8, 1 through 4. It says this: "O Lord, our Lord, your majestic name fills the earth. Your glory is higher than the heavens. You have taught children and infants to tell of your strength, silencing your enemies and all who oppose you. When I look at the night sky and see the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars you set in place, what are mere mortals that you should think about them? Human beings that you should care for them." Here the psalmist tells us that God's creation puts things into perspective. You know that feeling of smallness that you get when you look at the ocean, or maybe a tall mountain, or images of galaxies billions of light years away of the earth, maybe like the Milky Way? It puts things into perspective, doesn't it? God, here's this vast, huge, massive creation that you created, and I'm just this little tiny speck in it, yet you desire to have a relationship with me. Isn't it incredible that the same God who created the vast universe would somehow, some way, still care about you and me and the tiniest details of our lives? He wants to know them. He wants to care for them. He wants to provide for them. He wants to protect them. If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, I haven't, but I've seen pictures. If you've ever been to the Grand Canyon and you look at this massive thing and how tiny somebody would be standing in the center of it, but yet God tells us in his word that he cares about that tiny speck of that person standing in the middle of this vast Grand Canyon. And not only does he care about them, but he cares about the smallest details of them. And that's true for you, and that's true for me, even in this very moment. But of course, God cares about us, right? We are God's creation. We're God's creation. He's going to care about us just like he cares for the rest of the world. The same care God took in creating the mountains, oceans, and galaxies, God took in creating us. Let's look at Psalm 139, verses 1 through 7. It says this: "O Lord, you have examined my heart, and you know everything about me. You know when I sit or stand. You know my thoughts even when I am far away. You see me when I travel and when I rest at home. You know everything that I do. You know that what I'm going to say even before I say it, Lord. You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. I can never escape your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. So here in this psalm, the psalmist tells us we are known by our Creator. There's nothing that we could do or think that God does not know about before we do it or after we do it. God is all around us. He's before the moment, in the moment, and after the moment. He's around us at all times, and he knows every single detail of our lives. Even the things that we want to hide from everybody else, he knows it. There is nowhere that we can go where we can't find evidence of our Creator. We can't escape God or the knowledge of God because God's Spirit is everywhere. God's creation is everywhere, and you and I are a part of that creation. Let's look at Psalm 139, verses 13 through 18. It says, you made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion, and as I was woven together in the dark of the womb, you saw me before I was born. Every day my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day has passed. How precious are your thoughts about me, O God. They cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of the sand, and when I wake up, you are still with me. See, here the psalmist tells us God is reflected in creation, even you and me. One of the places where we probably don't think to look to God is even in our own reflection. But because you are God's creation, your existence reveals something about the character of your Creator. Here the psalmist tells us God is reflected in creation, even you and me. One of the places we probably don't think about looking for God is in our own reflection. But because you are God's creation and I am God's creation, your existence and my existence reveals something about the character of our Creator. So let's talk about this beautiful beginning. God starts with a blank slate in the very first chapters of the Bible and the very first chapters of the universe. Okay. Remember when we talked about some of the musicians and artists that we love in the opener that Pastor Josh talked about? Think about the creation of the world like a giant orchestra, and our one God put together one instrument at a time. See, God started by laying the foundations of the heavens and the earth. Then one day and night they were added. Then the oceans and the land. Then God began to fill the earth with creatures. And on the sixth and final day of creation, God created you and me. See, Genesis chapter 1, verse 26 says this, then God said, let us make human beings in our own image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, the livestock and all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground. You and I, we were created in God's image, patterned after Jesus, after the Spirit, and after God the Father, of their own selves, of them. We have the imprint of God within us. It is at the very core of who we are and how we were formed. We cannot escape God's image and God's creation because we are made in the image of God as God's creation. So when we worship, we are simply reflecting back to God along with all the rest of creation that we were made by our good Creator. There's one more psalm I want us to read, and this one reminds us that we're invited to join in the rest of creation in worshiping our good Creator, and it's this, Psalm 95, verses 3 through 7. It says this, for the Lord is great God, a great King above all gods. He holds his hands in the depths of the earth and in the mightiest of mountains. The sea belongs to him, for he made it. His hands formed the dry land too. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God. We are the people he watches over, the flock under his care. If only we would listen to his voice today. So here the psalmist tells us, you are invited to worship. You're invited to you're invited to become members of this grand symphony. That's what happens when our big idea comes to play, our big idea for the night. That's what happens when we worship with all of creation. And so I know my buddy, Pastor Eric with a K, is going to tell us how we could apply this in a everyday way. But before we get to that point, you know what time it is, and I know what time it is. We're going to take a little break because it's game time!
All right, it is game time, and today's game is for those of you who you have these things that you know, and it doesn't matter, doesn't help anything really. It doesn't help. It's not doesn't isn't worth anything for school. It doesn't help you move further along in life, except for maybe when you're around with some friends and something comes up and you happen to know, like if you're in Niagara Falls and you happen to know the useless fact of how many gallons of water go over Niagara Falls every day, right? But if you don't know those things, or if they, well, knowing those things doesn't really help any other way, right? This game is for you. This game is for you. Useless facts. Know your unimportant history. So let's go ahead and we're going to jump right into the game and see what our first thing is here. So this, okay, yeah, everyone knows the person who's always ready to jump in and tell you some random out in left field unimportant fact. This game is for them. All right, in 1960, an estimated 4,000 people were over 100 years old in the US. By 1995, the number had jumped to A, 15,000, B, 20,000, C, 30,000, or D, 55,000. And to keep it track in the chat, don't put A, B, C, or D, put the number. What do you think by 1995 the number had jumped to? How many people were 100 years old in the US? All right, 3, 2, 1. The answer is 55,000. That is quite the jump in 35 years. Wow. All right, next questions. Rockets were first made by whom more than 750 years ago? What? Germans, the US, Chinese, or Russians? Who made rockets over 750 years ago? Answer 3, 2, 1. The answer, my friends, is the Chinese. Who knew? What did those rockets look like? Were they in those paper bags? I don't know. I don't know. All right. Question number 3. In 1921, the heaviest snowfall ever recorded fell over Silver Lake, Colorado. How much snow fell? Was it 76 inches, 126 inches, 56 inches, or 96 inches? I know in just south of Buffalo, New York, Houghton College, where I went to college, we had about 3 feet of snow fall in 24 hours. That's 36 inches. This is significantly more. What do you think it is? Put in the chat. 3, 2, 1. The answer, my friends, 76 inches. That is insane amount of snow. Wow. All right, next question. Ancient Egyptians slept on pillows made of what? Down, lamb's wool, stone, or pig lard? I don't know about you, but I don't think I would want to sleep on a pillow made of pig's lard. Or stone for that matter. All right, answer. 3, 2, 1. The answer, my friends. Ooh, stone. Interesting. Those ancient Egyptians, they were something else, weren't they? All right, next question. In 1938, the first minimum wage was established in America for how much an hour? 1938, was it 79 cents, 25 cents, $1, or $2? I remember my first job, I picked berries and I made 25 cents per little pint that I picked. What do you think was the first national minimum wage? 3, 2, 1. The answer, my friend, was 25 cents. That would have been my guess right there, knowing what I made when I first started out. All right. Strangers shook hands in ancient times to show what? They weren't afraid of disease. They were human. They were friendly. They were unarmed. Well, I mean, disease was worse, I think, back then than it is now because they didn't have antibodies and medicine and all that stuff like we do. But what do you think the answer is? Just put disease, human, friendly, or unarmed. All right, 3, 2, 1. It is they were unarmed. I had a feeling it might be that. That shows that they do not have a weapon in their hand. All right, next question. In 1877, the first sound recording ever made was Mary Had a Little Lamb, The Star-Spangled Banner, God Bless America, or Single Ladies. Maybe that's where Beyonce got it. I don't know. What do you think was the first sound recording ever made? 3, 2, 1. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. All right. 3,000 years ago, most Egyptians died by the time they were 50, 45, 30, or 35. Remember, don't put the letter in. Put the number in there so we can see in the chat because it kind of goes too quickly sometimes. 3,000 years ago, Most Egyptians died by the time they were what? You know, I don't know what the average lifespan is. This would be good right now. I think we're in like 76 maybe is the average US lifespan. I'll find that answer out before the end of our game. All right, or near the end of our game. The answer, my friends, is 30. 30 years old was the average Egyptian died. Wow. All right, question number 9. In 1980, a Las Vegas hospital suspended workers for betting on how many hot girls would visit the ER, when patients would die, how many patients would be intoxicated, and when doctors would misdiagnose a patient. All right, what do you think the answer is? I had to move myself out of the way there. Hot girls, death, intoxicated, misdiagnose. That is it. That's a crazy betting game there. All right, 3, 2, 1. The answer is when patients would die. Man, Vegas. And only in Vegas, right? Just craziness. Okay, last question. Who could not view the Olympic Games in ancient Greece under penalty of death? Like you watch the Olympic Games and the law was you would be killed. Was it slaves, Romans, children, or married women? Who would be put to death if they watched the Olympic Games in ancient Greece? That's some tough stuff right there. All right, put your answer in. 3, 2, 1. The answer, my friends, is married women. What? Married women, if they watch the Olympic Games, could be killed under penalty. Yeah, they could have penalty of death. That is insanity. All right. So the producers have given me an answer on what the average lifespan is in the US today. And as of 2019, it is 78.8 years old. I was pretty close. All right, that is your useless facts, knowing unimportant history. How did you do? You got 1,000 points for each question. How did you? Put it in the chat. All right, and I'm going to jump on into the finalizing of the message today. Here we go. So back to what Eric Wade was talking about. You know, these Psalms talk about creation, and we've seen that creation declares God's glory, right? Creation is you and me, and it's all of creation around us, and that we're invited to worship God along with the rest of creation. So what do we do with that? How do we worship God? How do we with God's glory? How can we see God's glory in creation? I want to do a little exercise for us. So right now you might not be able to see mountains or oceans or galaxies, but we can use our imagination. Remember when we used to use our imagination? If you haven't used your imagination in a while, that's what we're going to do right now. So I want to invite you to close your eyes, okay? Close your eyes, and I want you to picture creation, some sort of creation that God has made. And I want you to use all 5 of your senses, all right? So touch, smell, sight, hearing, taste. I want you to use all of those senses to imagine creation right now. What is it you see right now? Do you see trees? Maybe you see the sky or water, or maybe it's the night sky. What are you smelling? Maybe it's freshly cut grass or the hot pavement, or maybe it's the trees in the area. What do you hear? Do you hear birds? Are there insects, or are there kids playing? Are there people passing by in cars and honking their horns? What do you feel? Do you have any sensations on your skin? Is there warmth from the sun or coolness from a breeze? What are in all of those? Just get that picture. Are you surrounded by mountains, or are you surrounded by buildings or trees or people? All of it reflects God, our creator. And if we're paying attention to the world around us, we can see and hear and smell and touch and taste just how big and beautiful and well designed God's creation is. When was the last time you thanked God for his creation? When was the last time you just stopped and just said, God, thank you. Thank you for what you created, and worshiped him as a result of that? We can do that on a regular basis. You know, most people think in the church, when we talk about worship, it's just singing. But there's so much more to worship. And this week, I want you to really be thinking about, how can you worship God this week? Maybe it's actually creating something, like you write a poem, or maybe in your small group, you want to come up with an idea of doing something together. Like, we're going to write a poem together this week. We're just going to come up with a couple of lines. Or maybe it's writing a song or drawing or something like that. Maybe for you, maybe worshiping God this week is spending time reading the Bible, or praying silently or out loud to God, or reading a book about God and who he is, or listening to a message online about God. Maybe worshiping God this week for you is helping someone, or maybe it is taking care of God's creation and going outside and cleaning up your neighborhood. That's worshiping God. Do you know tithing, okay, which is giving back a portion of what God has given to you? Everything we have, God's already, that's his kind of gift to us. We get to steward that. We get to manage what God has given to us. So financially giving back a portion of what God has given to you, that's worship. So if that's not a regular part of what you do, maybe this week you decide, this is something I'm going to do. I'm going to start giving back to God. Maybe it's saying thank you for who God is, or something that God has done. There's so many ways to worship God. And because God is a good creator, an incredible creator, we can worship with all of this creation. So this week, will you do exactly that? All right, I'm going to send it back to our hosts, and we'll catch you later. Okay, so we are about to jump into small groups. Here's the deal. We recognize that some of you are not ready to be in person. If you're ready to be in person, Sunday mornings, 11 o'clock at our Ontario, Victorville, Rialto, and Banning campus. We're meeting at all of those 11 o'clock for student services. If you're not ready to be back together, that's why you're here, and that's okay. Or maybe you serve on 1 or 2 Sundays a month, and you have to miss the Sunday, so you come Wednesday night. That's great. We have a small group. It's for you. We want you to be part of it. It's happening right after this, 7 o'clock, right after here. On the screen, you see the link there. It's bit.ly/SS small group. Okay, there's 3 S's for Sunrise Students Small Group. Okay, put that link into your browser, whatever browser you use to get on the internet. Put that link into the browser, and that'll take you right into that small group. We'd love for you to join us today. Okay, let people know. If you're like, hey, I want my friend to join me on my small group, text them right now that link and jump into small group. We go for about a half hour or so. We'd love to have you be part of it. Okay, and we will catch you next week. Have a good one. See ya.